I guess we're live. So hello, bonjour, Annie, hola. My name is Garrett Ryan. I am with Artist Relations here at Fringe North this season. I am very happy to be back on our live Fringe North Roundtable, which we do every Thursday at 6:30. Today, we have a very exciting edition of the live stream as we are joined by Caitlin Townsend, who is the interim artistic producer 2022 of Fringe North. But while she's been on previously as a co-host and facilitator, today we are very privileged to have a discussion with her regarding her story and the path that led her to this position with Fringe North today. So yeah, if you want to say hello, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a little bit weird being on like the receiving end of interviewing rather than the other way around. I'm used to the opposite. So I am feeling a little bit like more nervous than usual today. I will admit that, but I'm excited to be here and to chat to everyone and kind of dive into things. And yeah, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I think this is going to be great. We had Tova on a few weeks ago, and now having you here, it's just great to get to know the people behind the curtain making this festival happen. So I guess first off, just to kind of contextualize this whole conversation, tell us a little bit about your role in the festival.
Yeah, so for those who haven't had a chance to jump into our live stream, this will all be new if you've seen me on before. I haven't mentioned tidbits of it before, but essentially I am the interim artistic producer for this year's festival. So I'm jumping in for a year just to like help and get things going. Essentially in my role, I kind of oversee all of the staff, help them do what they need to do in order to make this festival happen, support everyone, make sure that all the pieces are coming together, that there's communication across teams. Yeah, and working with like the artists as well and kind of connecting us with the board too and being that like go-between between the staff and the board, which has been really fun. And yeah, I'm kind of like do all the things, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like, I guess I would describe the role most as like unleashing people to perform at their full potential so that they can do what they need to do for the festival and kind of like enabling people to jump out of the nest and use their wings and fly.
That's a great description. I can definitely say from the staff side of it, it is. I don't know if I could give a specific rundown of your job description because you do everything. So that's a great way to describe it because you're all over the place making sure this festival's running smoothly. So thank you for that. So I guess just to jump into it, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up here. I know you have had some sort of experiences with art. You've talked about in previous roundtables some performance type things growing up, but I know this is what you went to school for. You didn't like get an art degree or anything like that. So how did you end up here? What was your journey like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like stepping into the world of arts on a professional level, like Fringe would be the only place that I would truly feel comfortable doing that because a lot of my experience is not in the professional way. So I'll kind of go through quickly through the year's journey. So growing up, I took flute lessons. I think that was the first instrument that I was actually introduced to, and instruments were kind of like my first form of art, if you don't count like finger painting, which I guess is art too, but I was never very good at it. I got more paint off the paper than on it. So it's not a matter of artistic. When I say I'm not good, it wasn't a matter of like preference as to what the final piece looked like. I paint as a kid, I would get it all over everything but the page I was supposed to be actually getting it on. But so music was my first like actual introduction to arts where I felt like I was good and capable and able to do what I was intending to do. From there, like I grew up acting with my cousins. We used to make film and like what I would call like digital theater before digital theater was a thing. So we did a lot of that over the years. My main thing with like acting was actually backyard talent shows, and we would put on little plays as well as like I would play my flute for those too, and we would set up like dance routines, and it was all kinds of art mixed into one, which was why I loved doing them so much, was because we could just as kids do, oh, I want to sing today, I want to do this form of art today, and we would combine it all together. And there'd be about 12 of us from the neighborhood who would just put them on. We raised money for different charities around town, the soup kitchen, we did the hospital at one point when they were fundraising for like heart equipment and different stuff like that. So I definitely have always been in the arts. One of my favorite childhood memories is actually my friends and I were putting on this play for one of these talent shows in my backyard. And typically I was kind of like, I guess you could say the producer of them, because I would gather everyone together. Everybody would have like their, who was going to do the plays, who was going to do the dance routines and everything. And I was sort of like oversaw it and got the flyers around the neighborhood and like all of those fun elements of it. And my favorite childhood memory, or one of them, we were doing a play and my one friend Patrick had to be in our back little shed because he had to like jump out, and it was like a mystery, and a play about like money being printed illegally. I don't remember much more about it. It was several years ago, but he had this like mask on and dress outfit, and he had to like jump out at one point and be like the bad guy. And after the play was done, we forgot to tell him that he could come out of the shed. So in like hot summer weather, he was in there for like an extra hour, and then we all to get a laugh about it afterwards and inviting him to come out, and like it was funny. I feel bad for him being in there the whole time though, but it was good. So like backyard talent shows like that, and organizing them. And then when I hit my teenhood, I was actually in a worship band for my church. We had, well, it wasn't really with my church. A bunch of us youth who had met through my church started our own band. And we actually toured to like Elliott Lake, which was one of the highlights of my teen years. And I really got into songwriting. I had been like writing lyrics before and also doing like the vocals for pieces. Like I've been writing since I was probably 10 years old. I started songwriting, but I didn't have like, it's hard to play a flute and do like music that you typically see on stage with a flute. Definitely possible. A lot of bands now have integrated that kind of music and done like the instrumental pieces integrated into rock music, but I was not skilled enough at flute to be able to do that. So I started just writing songs and melodies throughout the years, and I was very into just kind of like being in that music space and creating. I've always had a preference for creating rather than just singing and doing the songs, but to write my own and to share my own story through that. So that was a large part of that too. And then when I hit university, I actually ran our film club at Algoma University for a few years locally. And it was a lot of fun. And I personally got a little bit discouraged with it because what we were aiming to do was to rotate. So every 2 weeks we would meet and watch a movie, and every 2 weeks was supposed to be like a filmmaker's workshop. But we had a hard time getting people out to that. And then we also had a hard time actually getting skilled enough people out that we knew what, like a lot of people were like, oh, I came to learn. And we were like, well, we don't, no one here knows, so we can't teach each other. And it was kind of like, it fell apart very quickly. So it became more of just like watching films and discussing them, which is great, but not exactly why I intended to get in on it. And then I had some stuff happen with my family that it just, too much going on in my life. I couldn't sustain it when it was something that was becoming more work than passion. So I had to pass it off to someone else. And I think it died slowly after that, unfortunately. But yeah, that's kind of like my journey in the arts. So when the pandemic hit, I had been working as a life coach and also going to school. I actually was attending school digitally before everyone was forced to attend school digitally. So I was getting my master's in theological studies. And I was really enjoying doing it long distance and that, and also working part-time as a life coach. And my goal was to specialize as a spiritual development life coach. So I was taking my degree and still working. And unfortunately, the organization I was with, partway through COVID, had to move to a new building, and there wasn't enough office space for all of us. So I didn't have as much income from that. I was still meeting clients online, but some of them didn't want to meet online. I didn't really know at that point how to advertise online, so I wasn't really able to get new clients that way. And so essentially my income just like cut back significantly. And then I graduated. So I was like, well, what do I do now? And that was in May 2020. And then I ended up going to our career center, the Sault Ste. Marie Community Career Center, and taking a program there. And the purpose of it is to find you employment. So you get some training actually on site, and then they find you a placement to work for a few weeks at an organization. And I got paired up with Fringe, and I was super excited when I heard about it because it just felt like this art space that I wanted to be involved in, and it kind of like shook up my heart again for all of those parts of myself that I had kind of shut off. Like I said, in university when um, I was running the film club, and it kind of like came to a halt, and everything was going on with my family. So I had realized, I didn't really recognize it till then, but I had really shut off that part of my life and anything that was like arts related when everything happened with my family. So it was kind of like this, I would call it like divine providence, and just like the fact that I ended up with Fringe, it really awakened that part of my soul again, and I'm just so appreciative of it. And yeah, initially I had entered the program hoping just to get short-term employment so that I could save up some money and then put it into my business, but I ended up loving the Fringe space, and I'm still here almost 2 years later at this point. So it's been great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. That's fantastic. That's a amazing story, and I think it really speaks to a lot of what Fringe is about. I think a lot of your experiences making performance as as a kid is really like at the heart of what a lot of Fringe artists do now, like very like ground up kind of theater making, just like get everyone together, find some space and do it. So I think you were the perfect person. You had a, even though you didn't like, you know, plan to go to university and like study this and go into this, you had the foundation there already.
Mhm.
So that's great. You talked a little bit about overcoming some of these hurdles, these roadblocks, and you know, coming through on the other side and ending up with Fringe. And you spoke about how the kind of being paired up with Fringe allowed the your passion for the arts to kind of come through again.
Mhm.
So what is it specifically that speaks to you about art? Like what is it, do you think, that awoken that passion for you, and
Yeah.
has kept it kindled up to this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am really one for like arts as a form of healing, and restoration and rebuilding in life. And to me, that is where the true power of art lies. And like, yes, there's a lot of art that we can say, oh, it's just for fun, but like even that has healing power. And it doesn't have to be like a serious topic in art for that to have that resonance with someone, and to, you know, inspire them to go till the next day, and everything. So with my background, my uh, family history, there was a lot of like um, difficult times and just hardship, and trying to get through all that. Uh, During my high school years, my band was really what like invigorated me to keep going, and also like seeing music played on stage different places. And I'm also a very spiritual person, so also like worship music in particular is something that has resonated with me when I've been in that space. And I've been to points where I was just completely deflated and suicidal, and it's what re-invites you to engage with life again, and re-invites you to have find meaning and purpose in various things. So I really think that that element of art is just so important and so potent that it just can't be compared to anything else. Like, it speaks to the soul in the way that other things just don't have that same power. And I mean, I use art in like a broad sense here, because also like there's very technical jobs that you can inspire like creativity in that and bring a level of art to that space. I think our definition in society of what art is has kind of been confined to a little bit of a box. But like, to engage with that like humanness and excitement of speaking to the soul is just a really important thing, and so underestimated, I think, sometimes even in my own life. And so as I was going through like family hardship, it's what got me through the day. And for me too, connecting with God has always been like, the arts are just a very powerful way that I connect with God, creator, source, spirit, whatever term everyone uses for it. Yeah, it's just it keeps me going, keeps me restored and wanting to like rebuild and keep going. And I think for me, in university, when everything kind of like I shut off to that and wasn't involved in the arts, I hadn't really realized how numb I had become to just what was happening around me in life, and really turning off that. um, my strategy for, so for those who don't know my family history, my brother ended up in jail, and I think it was at that point that I just like kind of like became numb, and I wasn't really engaging with life in the same way that I used to be. And so art being that key that unlocks that part of our like inner selves, and able to like sort through and kind of process some of the pieces of the past too, and to sort through and to heal from it, and to uh, see the good in it, because there's always good in circumstances. And I think that the power of positivity kind of gets skewed in society right now too, with like, oh, just be more positive, and it's kind of not helpful. But like in a genuine way of teasing out the bad from the good, and to see those little key silver linings throughout. For me, art is what allows me to dig into that and to uh, process it. And I've worked in a lot of spaces with people who have had trauma and serious things happen in their past, where I've seen it not just in my own life, but with my clients, with my friends, with some of the volunteer work that I do as well. And that art is really that piece that can get two people who think they're completely on opposite sides to actually meet somewhere in the middle and say like, oh, look, we're actually both healing in the same way and working through things. We're just using different terminology around it. But like art is that thing that doesn't need the terminology. So it just hits the heartstrings on both ends and connects people and creates that unity.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with, especially, I was really struck by the idea of art speaking to the soul. Um, you're right. There's only, we're connected in the sense that we both are very spiritual, religious people. There are things that words can't say. There are books that can express theology in very interesting and dynamic ways, but there are certain things that it's not going to be able to hit in the way that music and paintings and theater, like those can evoke emotion and speak to the soul so much stronger than just
Mm.
speaking or like the written word.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think an element too is like it allows you to process and engage with those things from a safe distance.
Yes.
And especially if you're like new to engaging in like healing, or even like the religious element too, like if something's new, it can be scary and it can be
Yeah.
overwhelming. And when you can like kind of touch on it from a distance, and especially with healing, because sometimes going into our pain is a lot and overwhelming. And if we just sit and reflect and go into our own pain, it can be really crippling in a lot of cases. Whereas if you can go through it through the lens of someone else's story, it has a different
Yes.
safety element to it. So for me, and I know this is very pop culture, and I think I've mentioned it before in one of the roundtables, but for me, when the Depth Heard trial was going on, it was so restorative because I was able to view it through the lens of another story that wasn't so personal, but a lot of elements were very similar to some of the things I had been through. So rather than trying to like directly tap into my own pain, I got there through like the avenue of hearing someone else's story and connecting with it through that in a way that allowed me to engage with it almost like from a bird's eye view, so that you're kind of like not so swept up in the emotion of what happened to you, but you're kind of viewing it as that broader picture and processing from a way of like, how can I tease through these pieces? And for me, that's what storytelling does. It allows us to walk through the elements that we may be scared to like completely unveil in our lives, and to dig at them bit by bit through that lens of like being safely enough removed that it's not so personal that it becomes just like crippling and overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think like tying that back into the idea of art speaking to the soul, I think anyone who has experienced any element of that through art or through some that kind of protective lens of art or media or whatever it is, and they can kind of reach beyond themselves or see something in themselves or see kind of have that like deep experience that was facilitated through that medium. I think I'd quantify that as being a religious or spiritual experience, even if it's not specifically trying to like connect you with God. If so, you can be completely atheist and still have that kind of deep religiously adjacent experience through art. And I think everyone has experienced that. Anyone that's had kind of those deep emotions stirred through any form of art I think can understand that idea.
Yeah, and I think so there's kind of two ends to this too, right? Because there is like that being on sort of like the receiving end of art, which I feel like is what you're more speaking of.
Yes.
But then
Yep.
there's also like for those who have had instances where they haven't been able to have a voice in certain circumstances, art is a way to have a voice that's almost invited, and maybe not by everyone, because not everyone's going to like your art, but like it's invited by, if I were to get up on stage and just start screaming about my past, it may not
Yeah.
land well with some people, but it's like a safe container to voice the things that you were never able to voice over the realm of your experience in a place that's invited, and people are actually looking to hear that voice, as compared to like, I don't know, just going out and confronting someone from your past. It's a different way to like engage on the creation side too.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you think that Fringe specifically facilitates that type of like pure art that we're
Mm.
speaking of? How do you think Fringe, as compared to, I don't want to say as compared to like other festivals, but maybe let's say compared to more like um, mainstream, non-independent type of theater, like big budgety type theater? What is like Fringe, this kind of ground up, almost startup type of theater? Like how does it specifically facilitate that?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's more freedom for voice because there's not competing voices at the table. It's the artists that want to be, and like that's not to say like when you're co-creating with anybody, there's going to be give and take, but it's in a different way and a more human approach than, oh well, we have to sell tickets to this or we're not going to make a budget, or like we're putting money into this so we want to get money out. And like, yes, Fringe artists, for those who aren't aware, do put money into their projects. I'm not saying they don't, but like it's a different level than when you have like competing voices who may not be actually on the ground in the project. Like with Hollywood, for example, you've got like the investors' voices, you've got the shareholders' voice. Like there's just a lot of other competing voices who aren't actually in the middle of the creation process and aren't it. They're viewing the project from kind of that like fully bird's eye view, rather than being able to have like that integrated, like I'm on the ground working in this approach. So I think that shifts things because essentially when you have like shareholders and that, they're worried about their voice being heard in terms of like profits and that, rather than like the artistic integrity of the voice, which is two different things. And I'm not saying that Hollywood, well,
You can probably say that. I think that's.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Not all of Hollywood. There are some good people doing like good human-based work. But it's harder to do when you have those different layers that you have to navigate versus actually just being on the ground and not having to worry about those external things. So I think that that's one element. I think also because of the nature of Fringe, and like, so for those who don't know, like essentially the festival provides the platform, so you don't have to worry about booking venues, you don't have to worry about those different pieces that take up time and energy, so you can worry about your piece. And I think
Mhm.
maybe not all artists agree with me on this, but like for myself, when I'm in the art sphere, if I'm spending time and energy on those pieces, I can't pivot as quickly. Whereas if I decide like, oh, I want to do something different in this piece, if I'm only creating for the one presentation, like I can shift that. I can have time to do last minute changes in a way that if I'm also having to like book venues and focus on like finding sound equipment and like those different pieces, I just don't have the time and capacity to do all of that. And so it's almost like you can tune into your heart a little bit more, if I can word it that way, to say this is what I'm feeling compelled to shift in the moment, rather than having to have like your headspace filled of all these other pieces that you sometimes would be working on with bigger productions. So it allows for like the authenticity piece, in terms of like you can create and write a play and be fully authentic to you in that moment, but then as you're like a couple months out down the road, like as human beings we're constantly shaping and growing, and who we are today is not who we were yesterday. So that authenticity gets like, I don't want to say completely lost, because it's not, it's still there, like it's an authentic piece, but like if you can make small adjustments in the moment, and that it just allows for like a different kind of integration of authenticity than having to think with like that longer term piece mindset, and to have to be like worried about where am I getting a venue, where am I, like all those other pieces. It's just yeah, to me it's like what you're compelled to do in the moment can shift more easily too. I think with Fringe's like censorship too is huge because so many places have like censorship now. And yeah, so that's an important piece too, is that people can give their true voice and
Mhm.
they don't have to worry about those elements of like, is saying what I want to say going to get me kicked off stage and those different pieces.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are completely we provide the kind of framework for everything, and we just let the artists do their thing. So that's what I love about fringes in general, Fringe North and all fringes. Um, I really like what you were saying about the idea of kind of mixing up that like head work and heart work, because I love doing the production stuff like I'm doing with Fringe North right now, and I love doing the creative stuff. I hate when I have to do both things because they do bleed into each other.
Mm.
Like try if you're into that heart work and then you're having to worry about like securing venues and stuff, you get so emotional about it, and it's like you can't think clearly anymore. And then if you're too into the kind of planning stage, you're kind of feeling like blocked when you're trying to do the direction or acting or whatever role you're in. So I think that's a really good point about us taking care of that for the artists and letting them just do that hard work. I'm obviously there's still the production elements that they have to worry about on their end as well, but significantly less. Like we can hopefully lighten that load enough. Yeah. So outside of Fringe North, you run your life coaching business, as you mentioned. I want to talk a little bit about kind of bridging together those worlds, but I think first, if you could just talk a little bit about the type of work you do with your life coaching business, give us some context.
Yeah, for sure. So I came from a pretty rough upbringing, and it left me with a sense of like, what's next? Where do I go from here? And like I was in and out of counseling for a large portion of my life. I've been through just like the very quick overview for those of you who don't know my story. I've been through like sexual assault since the time I was 3 years old. I've been through my like parents' divorce, and that was pretty a more complicated divorce than most divorces. Not that any of divorce is easy. And then I also had like my brother had a lot of mental health problems growing up, and he actually ended up in jail for severe charges as well. So there was like a lot of times where I wasn't safe in the home physically because he was pretty violent by the end as well. So just living through all of that trauma, I was naturally in counseling for like a lot. I also had an eating disorder at one point. I had an addiction. Like there's a lot. I've been through a lot of counselors and a lot of mental health practitioners. They were all helpful, but like what I would often find each time is I would get to the end, and at some point they would ask me like, why are you still attending sessions? It seems like you're okay with where you're at and whatever latest trauma had occurred. And I was, but like I was always left feeling like, well, but where to from here? Because counseling gets us comfortable with that, what happened, but it doesn't show us how to build that brighter future and where to head. And like that's what counselors are trained to do, is to get you comfortable where you are. So it's not like they were any of them were doing a bad job. They were all excellent at their jobs, but like it left me with like, well, what do I do? Where do I go from here? Is my past always going to define me? And like, how do I free myself from that? So when I heard about life coaching, it was super excited because like, this is what I've been looking for and never had for myself. And I wanted to be able to give that to others and to provide that space where people can rebuild, heal, and move forward, rather than just getting comfortable where they are, but to actually be heading towards something new as well. So I built like I said, I was with this other company, and then I built my company during the pandemic. So I was actually working at both for a little while because I couldn't meet with clients in the office when everything was closed down. So I created the online company, and then when I got laid off, I just was doing this and like have been slowly building it over time. I've worked with clients from around the globe, super exciting. Our principle is unity. So everything that we do is just to help people feel more unified with themselves, those around them, and the divine, whether they refer to that as God, spirituality in general, whatever deity that they worship. So with this, I kind of like, as I was thinking about it, was like, I also got really frustrated going to counseling over my life because a lot of practitioners come with a set of faith, and that they have of their own, or you just get like the completely like ones that don't have any faith. So it's like torn between two worlds. Whereas for me, I have a very mixed upbringing when it comes to religion. I was involved in four different churches over at 1.5 days a week in the Sioux, because growing up they just had different programs different nights. So like I don't really have like one affiliation, and that often caused like friction points when you're then seeking out counseling, and they're like completely upfront with it on their websites and whatnot, but it's just like I don't feel like I fully fit. And I was finding that when I was working previously with North Shore Family Center, shout out to them, they were a great place to work, but what I was finding with a lot of my clients was like, this is the first time that I've actually had both elements of my belief received. And so in particular, living this far north, like a lot of individuals who come from like indigenous backgrounds and then also are Christian, like they feel like they can only be half of themselves in either context a lot of times, or for those who came, like clients who come from like different faith backgrounds, with their parents being one faith and one parent being the other, and like trying to like navigate that. Then you've also got like individuals who are in like the LGBTQ plus, and it's sorry for any letters that I forgot, because I know there's lots of other two S as well. But yeah, all of the different letters, who feel like they have to choose between their faith and their sexual identity. And so like all of these different things, or like even something as simple as like for myself, a lot of the denominations I was in didn't feel that women should be in leadership. So when I went to go get my master's degree, there was like some friction there too. And what I was noticing, and what I did my study for my thesis on in my undergrad for sociology, was actually like how what services weren't being provided in the church. And so essentially what came up was like, what would be coaching? I didn't have language for that right now, but essentially the areas of that would be coaching was what was needed. And then the other element of this being that I found out through that research that a lot of people end up leaving the faith, and it's like a huge like epidemic right now that people are walking away from faith. But interestingly enough, more people now than ever are actually saying that they identify as spiritual, but they don't identify with particular faith groups, because they essentially can't be that full version of themselves and be both sides. So as I was like processing what to do with setting up my own company, I was like, well, there's not really space that allows people to safely acknowledge all those elements of themselves and the intersectionality of it all, and to grapple through that as they work through their faith, rather than having to either leave one side behind or like leave the faith. Like you can be your full self. And as I was like reflecting on this and reflecting on just like the division between religions too, which has never really fully made sense to me. In my first year of university, the group that we used to hang out with, we'd get a little bit of like gesturing about it from other people, but one of us was from a Jewish background. There was myself, who was Christian, a Catholic, and then someone who was of the Muslim faith as well. And we were like, the four of us were inseparable. We would always spend time together. And it was like, people would make fun of it because it's just like, this is so unexpected. I'm like, but why? Why is that the case? Why do we not expect that? Why is it abnormal for that to be normal? And so as I was thinking through it, I'm like, one, people need a place to be all elements of themselves, and to not have to choose between their faith and certain sides of them, or to choose one faith over the other, but to just acknowledge all of those pieces that they have within themselves, and also between religions as well. So essentially what the company is a space for hopefully one day just a one-stop shop for anyone who's looking for spiritual guidance, and coaching through that lens, coaching and mental health practitioners in general, where they can come and find someone who's going to respect all elements of their faith, as well as like nowadays you get a lot of like general spirituality coaches, but they don't necessarily like dig into their scriptures of whatever your belief is. So I actually have like different, in my degree, I personally chose classes that would teach me about other religions, so that I have like that knowledge of not just knowing my own faith, but knowing where other people are coming from and being able to support them through that journey. So that's kind of like, I guess, the gist of what the company is. And we're 2 coaches right now, but hopefully growing as the years go on and bringing on more practitioners, so that we do have like that unity, not just between helping others find unity, but between religious groups as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all that. That's fantastic. So I'm wondering then, how do you take all of that you're clearly very passionate about, and also kind of, like I said earlier, like bridge it into this work in Fringe North as well? Like, do you see these 2 worlds connected together, and do you see your kind of common goal as being a similar one in both spaces?
Yeah, definitely. I think ultimately it's about building community, and that's what the heart of Fringe is building community, and what building community is building unity. So there's a lot of like crossover with that. And then also the element of like art has healing, and creating art has a healing space. So creating these spaces where, whether it's through like art or life coaching services, people can be their full authentic selves and not have to choose between certain sides of them, and not have to uh, stuff like part of themselves down inside and only express part of themselves. Ultimately, the goal both places is to allow people to be their full authentic selves and to express that in different ways, whether it's through their goal setting journey through coaching or through their art pieces that they create for Fringe. So I definitely see like tons of overlap between the two. I think ultimately unity is at the heart of all of it, and wanting to build that community and safe spaces for everyone to just be their full selves. Um, yeah, I also think like for art has creating has very healing powers, and also receiving too. And so I kind of look at it as, and I think we were chatting about this the other day, Garrett, but like Michael Jacobs is one of the people that I hugely look up to. And he's the creator of Boy Meets World for those, and Girl Meets World now too, for those of you who aren't familiar. And then Stephen Colbert as well. And both of these individuals come from faith backgrounds and decided to go into entertainment because there's a different way that you can express and reach more people, and essentially build that unity in a different way than you can if you're like directly talking about your religious faith. And for me, if anyone, like one of the most well-known episodes of Boy Meets World is Cult Fiction. And it completely just explores the element of belief in general. I would say belief over like religion specifically, but belief in higher power. And for me, that stuck with me so much as a kid, and it really shaped my um, some of my hard moments in life, that episode in particular. So thinking about the power of that and the power that art has. And so part of my goal long term for my company would be to actually integrate like faith-based plays and written works and like these different things that are actually like expressing outwardly, but without outwardly expressing it. So Garrett, we had talked the other day about how like some faith communities, faith entertainment is very like one-sided usually, versus like
Yeah.
that multi-dimensional approach to entertainment, where it's not like in your face
Mhm.
about the faith themes. So yeah, so I think it's like Fringe ended up being the perfect place for me to get like kind of dumped into with how the program worked when I was at the career center. Yeah, because it already has those like elements there, and for people to express that. um yeah, so I see them as kind of being very like so many parallels. I could go on, but I've been talking a lot, so I won't. Yeah.
I, I I'd like you to keep talking a lot. That's great. Um, yeah, no, we were having this conversation the other day. I definitely um, agree with the idea that art can, I say, a lot of the time be a better way to transmit. So not even it's not a way of proselytizing the faith at all. It's showcasing the values that are at the
Mhm.
core of the faith through media or through art. I think that's the important
Yep.
thing. I think the issue is that
Yep.
a lot of them are used to proselytize,
Yep.
which shouldn't be the goal because it doesn't produce good art and then it doesn't work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially it's about sharing the heart of it and not the systems of it, is
Yeah.
the way I would frame it. And like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, like we look at in for my religion, one of the most important things that we always have to remember is maybe the pinnacle moment in Jewish history is the Exodus from Egypt. And um, if you just keep one of the things you have to remember is remember we were slaves in Egypt, and it's the idea of breaking free from the bonds of slavery, and that's at the
Mhm.
core of our covenant with God. Um, and if you just have a rabbi lecturing you on that over and over again, it's not going to be very effective of a tool to like instill those values that come with the covenant. But you look at a movie like Prince of Egypt, and you have some like, because we were talking about Prince of Egypt the other day. I've had the song Deliver Us stuck in my head for so long. It'll always be stuck in my head. That's a way better way to transmit those ideas than just someone lecturing me.
Yeah.
So that's an example from that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good example too.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you think we can bridge this gap even more? Like what are the steps we can take to like in the arts world specifically? Like what are the steps we can take to open up our practices and make room for that level of authenticity that you're striving for?
Yeah, I think it's about inviting people to do it, and then also like removing judgment and it not being about like a final piece, but about the process. Because when it becomes about like the final piece, then it just puts like heaps of pressure on, and then if someone doesn't like it, it feels like a rejection of you as the
Mhm.
artist, rather than like, oh, it's just not their flavor or cup of tea. Um, but like so I think that's often where we miss the mark, because like, and I'm not saying as like Fringe North, but like in general as a
Yeah.
society, because often like we're all about like creating spaces for people to do it and be their full selves, but then like we almost like reject the end product, or like we don't really give it its due, or like even has something as simple as like, oh, this was so cool, but I don't want to pay you for it, just give it to me for free. Like that devalues human beings. And when we start to actually like remove judgment and not put like dollar values on things, and to actually like give people what they're worth, and then to appreciate it, um or like to also be careful with how we frame things too, and framing it in a way of like, oh, like that's a really cool art piece, but not really my my preference, versus, excuse me, versus like saying like, oh, I didn't like that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't realize the power of our language, and how we can acknowledge that something wasn't like our favorite thing to watch, without it making it seem like, making it seem as an overall like statement. And like we can acknowledge what we're bringing to the table in it ourselves, and saying like, oh, this didn't really speak to me, but I could see how it could speak to someone else. And like having that lens of actually appreciating all levels of human experience, even if it's not the one that you needed to hear that day, and it didn't necessarily have healing for you, acknowledging that there's probably other people that that was very healing for, or very enjoyable for, or they got a good laugh out of, even though you didn't find the jokes in it funny, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
To frame our, because I think we often write as like critics, and not even just write, but we speak as if we're like writing like critics, and the power that that can just dehumanize someone and just like not feel good. Whereas you're like, oh, it's just like an opinion piece, but you wrote it as like an objective view, rather than saying like, oh, like, this for me just didn't hit what I needed to hear. And acknowledging ourselves in it, because that changes the, and I think like myself as an artist, and other artists might disagree, but like when I write something and someone's like, cool, but I didn't like it, it feels so different from like, that was awful. Like, but when
Mhm.
you state it as an objective, it feels like it cuts to the bone in a way that, um, yeah, that nothing else does. It just
Yeah.
guts you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's an issue. I'm going to speak at least from the perspective of artist to artist relationships. I think there is definitely an issue of competitiveness that's instilled in artists. Um, when I was in high school, one of the things I was taught by some of the older people, and I'm sure they were taught by some of the older people in it, and it's a chain, is when we would go watch shows as a group, we would like leave the show after and talk about like all the bad things, like just like making fun of all the bad things. And I wish I could just go back and hit myself, because that's such a horrible thing to do. But that's just like what we're told to do, because we're so much better. Like, oh, we could have done this so much better. And it's this kind of inherent competitiveness um,
Mm.
that artists kind of like, because you're told right from the beginning that the arts world is very tough to make it in, and you're gonna be thrown into the water, so you're gonna have to fight to swim to the top. But like that is something that is taught right from the beginning. But if you reframe it and just see another person also trying to do their art and trying to showcase something and say something. I don't care whatever. It's not that I don't see a show as
Mm.
like quote unquote bad anymore, or it's not that I don't not enjoy shows anymore, but I always at least have the respect that the person came onto the stage and did something in front of an audience, that they had the guts to come out there and pour their heart out for whatever, an hour or 2 hours. That is commendable, no matter what, no matter how the quality seems to my perception, even like,
Mhm.
and that's
Yeah.
subjective as well, right? Like if I don't enjoy something, that's fine. If someone doesn't enjoy something of mine, that's fine. But let's support each other in doing it.
Yeah, I think part of that problem too is that we view success as a numbers game rather than impact.
Yeah.
And so this was something that occurred when I was in high school with my band and setting up like an evening worship service at church and whatnot. And like the problem, the board didn't think it was worth it to have because of the number of people that came out. But here's the, and it's so like music wise, but like in any kind of art, whether it's stage or whatnot, here's the thing, you could appeal to like a mass audience, but everybody like, oh, that was good, walks away, forgets about it. But what if like that one person in the audience like laughs their head off, like they just really enjoy it, or like they just feel inspired after? If it has impact on that one person and changes their life, we don't see that in our society as like
Mhm.
success because like the 500 other people didn't think anything of it. But you could have a full theater and everyone walks away and 2 weeks later forgets what the piece was even about because it was just an experience they all enjoyed but was fine, versus like everybody could leave and say that it was awful, but that one person, it could change their entire life from seeing that performance. And like for myself, that was a huge thing when it came to music. Like there were certain days that I saw bands playing that saved my life, that I would not be here without that. Or like I watched something on TV that just spoke to me in the moment that I was like, that's what I needed to hear. And some of these being like very like indie YouTube pulled together skits or whatnot that probably most of the world will never see, but I would not be here. And if you look at the trickle effects of like all everybody else's in life that I've impacted through life, and even the conversation that we're having now wouldn't exist if you were to remove that. And like
Yeah.
the compounding, like there could be generations that wouldn't exist later on
Yeah.
if I had not watched that one tiny piece of art that saved my life that day. And I think we really view success too much about like numbers in the moment rather than that like what is impact. And we may never actually know as artists too, like that's the hard thing about shifting that, because you can measure numbers, you can't measure impact, and you'll never know the full grand scale of it all. But if we start to frame it around that way, about it's not like the technical choices that were made about like where you stood on stage or like who said the line first or whether or not you got the timing just perfect, it's about like that greater um, impact. And maybe a piece could have been done later, but maybe someone who slipped up their line said what someone in that audience actually needed to hear that day and it saved their life. And if we start to
Yeah.
think about it that way, like we don't know the level of impact that our art is actually having on the world. And I am going to say that 99.99% of the time you're having way more impact than you realize as an artist. And I think too, because we don't actually talk about those pieces as a society of like admitting like, oh, like this thing actually shifted my view in a profound way. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah.
I think you're 100% right with that. That sort of lasting, even yeah, multi-generational impact. It's all connected, and I
Mhm.
know I've had people. I think generally, with the crowd of people that I hang out with, that the people that I associate myself with, the arts community or the performing arts community, at least the one I'm around, is not typically a very religious community. So when I've had people say to me that they are perhaps fearing death and they want comfort in religion, and say to me like, convince me not to be afraid of death, like convince me that there is something that happens after death, I would say to them that I'm not interested in, I don't care about proselytizing you. I don't care about someone being or having the same religious beliefs that I do in any way. That's not important to me. But as an artist, you're exactly right in saying that the work they do can live after them, and that is a life after death in essence. You don't have to be religious. You can be completely irreligious, completely atheist, and still hold comfort in the fact that what you're putting out there into the world is going to last beyond you, and
Mhm.
especially for artists.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
And and you don't know, like, how much it's really, like, already even impacting people
yeah,
too, like, there's so many layers to it that we just overlook so much because
yeah.
we didn't get say the line at the right time or, like, we hit the wrong chord on the guitar, like, who
Hmm.
cares? Like, we're making a difference in the world, and maybe that was, like, the thing that made someone have a reflection of, like, you hit the wrong chord, and they were like, "Oh, like, I've been so, like, perfectionist in my life," and maybe it, like, shifted their whole mindset when they started processing that, and yeah, you never know.
Yeah, I was thinking, and it can be the small moments. I was thinking literally earlier today, this memory popped in my head of one of the sort of truest examples of art that I've seen is I was doing a show with someone who was I forget how they were sick, but they were like cripplingly ill, like were like on the ground, could not move. And then like we had to go on stage and they just got up and went on stage and did the entire play like flawlessly and then came off and just like crumpled. And I was thinking about that earlier today. Uh, and that has always been something that has stuck with me, as I don't even know if they would remember that as a particularly momentous occasion in their artistic career. But for me, it's something that stuck with me, and it's something that has always kind of showcased to me like the true essence of what it means to be an artist and to like. I'm not saying you have to be injuring yourself to be an artist. Let me say that. Maybe I have some toxic ideas of what it means to be an artist, but for me, it's inspired me anyway, and it's inspired me to push through some things in pursuit of art.
Mhm.
So yeah, you never know what's going to inspire people.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's always, like, those little unexpected moments that stick with people the longest, and
Yeah,
they're usually from things that the person involved in them doesn't necessarily intend, it just kind of plays out that
yeah,
way.
yeah. It's I think often not intended by the performers, but it's the classic thing that actors know when you go on stage and you deliver your line that you think is going to make people cry and they burst into laughter, and you
Mm,
kind of just have to roll with it. You never know how it's going to affect someone on any given day at any given moment, and that's the fun thing. That's
mhm,
especially for theater. That's one of the best parts.
mm.
Um, do you have any specific moments that you can think of that kind of exemplify this kind of idea of art, the impact of art, that you can think of, or something that has particularly impacted you?
Mm. Yeah, I think so my very earliest one, would have been and I know this is kind of, like, flipping on its head from, like, your example where it's actually, like, the complete opposite, but someone had said to me, like, for the first time, like, "Wow, you have, like, a really good singing voice." And for me, I'm someone who has often struggled with feeling like I have value in the world and that I have, like, a place, and for me, just the way that the conversation happened, and I can't repeat it, like, word for word or anything, but just, like, how it made me feel, it was like, "Oh, like, I have something to offer this world, and I actually have, like, a place," and it shifted it shifted something in me for the first time ever where it was just like, "Oh, like, I can actually contribute to the world, and I have, like I deserve to be here," and not, like, because I often, especially, like, when I was suicidal in my life, like, feeling like, "Oh, I don't deserve to have life or be in existence," and it just shifted something in me that shifted how I was viewing things,
Mhm.
and something so simple that they probably don't even remember having that conversation with me, and it was just, like, kind of like it wasn't a straight up conversation, it was sort of said in passing as we were heading towards somewhere else, and,
Yeah.
it will never leave me. That is
Mhm.
a very good highlight of my life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I definitely have some experiences like that, like offhand compliment from someone that will just always, I'm like, really? Yeah. Yeah. Something that they probably forgot about an hour later, but is still with me.
mhm,
Um, I guess just noticing the time, we should probably start wrapping up. But I think okay, so I have two questions that I think are really important. I think the first one is and I know you've touched on it a little bit, but what is your long-term goal in relation to arts going forward? Like, what is your perfect path look like right now?
Oh man. Perfect path in an ideal world, I would end up in film and creating and directing film. I think that is would be amazing. I have so many different like film script ideas and just like stories that yeah, I want to see get out into the world, especially like having been through some really dark, hopeless moments in my life to always have that sense of hope that can offer people hope and offer inspire people to live their best lives. Um, in particular, one thing that I've thought of a lot, which I don't even know why I've thought of this before, but if I were to get into film, like I would want to do like film and like TV series as well. And like I always want to have at the start where it's dedicated to someone, but rather than a particular person, like I have one film script that I'm working on that I won't give too many spoilers so that nobody can steal it, but I want to actually just title it to the kid who really didn't take the cookie from the cookie jar. And just like things like that that are generalized, but they have like, so again, I don't want to give too much away for that script, but essentially like someone's innocent when they appear not to be.
Mhm.
Um, and just like things like that that can resonate on like a broad scale rather than having like, oh, I want to dedicate to like my mom or my dad or like what most people
Yeah,
do
yeah.
or like the artist in your life who made you go into the arts and like all of these different things. Like I want to have like those general two almost like two pieces of humanity rather than to specific people so that people can just like connect on that. So in a dream world, that's what I would want to do. um I also want to at some point put an album of worship music out. um that would be fun too.
Mhm.
And to just keep like letting people create their own art, and that's why I like being a part of Fringe, because it just creates that space where people who thought they could never do art professionally can step in and present what they have to say to the world. And I never want to stop being a part of allowing other people to have their voice too, and yeah, like bring everything to the table.
Great. That's awesome. And then I guess just my last question is, and you've answered this, but just to kind of sum it all up, um, how has working with Fringe North affected your life?
Yeah. Going back to the very beginning, it has just sparked back that part of myself that I had really shut off from the world, um, which has really changed a lot about just how I view life and view the world in general, and like connection and hope would be two words that I would throw out there as well. I just feel like a sense of um, for me in particular, growing up in Sault Ste. Marie and having a lot of like hardship in my family, I've often felt a sense of hopelessness about the community and wanting to make a difference and just feeling like it's so impossible to like push back and to actually make that difference. We have a lot of family trauma here. We have a lot of um, generational trauma that just keeps going, and it's really hard to step into those circumstances and to reshift things. And I get it because I have my own like family trauma and generational wounds that I am trying my hardest to push back against, but it's hard and it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work, and then you let it slide for 2 seconds and suddenly you're like 10 steps behind again and just trying to keep going at it. So I've found it really hard in the Sioux to have like a sense of hope for the community and that I can actually contribute and make a difference, and not wanting to just literally run away and get out of here and go to a different town. But
Mhm.
there's something in my heart that's like, I want to stay here. I want to be that change and elicit that change and growth for the community and to be a part of that. And I know it takes a whole slew of people. It's not like I can do it myself, but I think Fringe is the first place where I actually feel like, even if it's like little by little, inch by inch, we do have the ability to contribute to that and push back. And whereas in some of the other spaces I've been in, it feels like you're pushing back on the wall with all your might, but it's not even budging. Whereas with Fringe, I think art has the ability, and what we're trying to accomplish as a community and has inviting people into the Fringe family
Mhm.
slowly it's inching, and it might be like microscopic levels of inching, but for the first time it feels like there's actually a way to make a difference and it to actually have impact rather than it just be like trying and ending up like hitting your head against the wall. So I think that that's been an important piece for me because I don't want to give up on our community, and sometimes it is easier to pretend that there's no hardship or to run away from it or all of these other options. But I think ultimately, um, I want to steward my past and what I've been through well and be a voice for that change, from the things that I've learned from having been there and having had my fair share of hardship here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. And
Yeah.
yeah, really
And
enjoyed it.
thank you. Or do you have anything you wanna say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess if anyone's interested in knowing more about my life coaching business, you can reach out to me at caitlin.townsend93@gmail.com. Again, that's caitlin.townsend93@gmail.com. You can also give me a phone call, 705-206-6786, 705-206-6786, or you can check out our website, which is down below, www.abrahamsfortune.com, to find out more. So yeah, I would really appreciate hearing from some of you and connecting and yeah, just learning more about what's going on in your lives too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight or for joining us later on after we've aired. Merci, miigwech, gracias. And just a reminder that Fringe North 2022 will be from August 18th to the 21st, and tickets will be on sale August 1st on our brand new website, which is suefringe.com. You can see that on my name here, and I think it'll probably be the link below as well, or in the description below. And you can check out our website and all of our social media channels, which are also in the description, for more information on tickets and anything else you'd like to know about the festival. And also keep an eye on our social media for our exciting Fringe Fledgling Challenge. Our large stuffed bird mascot has been making their way around the zoo, still is as we speak. And if you find him, you might be able to win some very exciting prizes. We will be at Marconi Meets World. Is it this weekend, I believe? Yes, we will be there this weekend. So come by and say hello. And if you want to know anything about the festival, if you have any questions, anything like that, come talk to us. We're looking forward to seeing you there. And if you want to support the amazing work that Caitlin and I and everyone else on our incredible team is doing, please consider tipping the Fringe, which you can also find in the description below and on our website. It'll help us keep doing all this work that we're doing and keep this space up that we're opening up for all these artists to have their authentic voices heard. We will be back next Thursday with another live stream, and we can't wait to see you. So thank you so much once again, and have a wonderful night.
Thanks. Bye.